Hi everyone, Chicken here. In the last lesson, we covered some particle effects that we can add to our finished illustration. In this lesson, I will show you some really quick and easy effects that we can apply to our finished art to give it more of that polished professional look. First, the one I use the most, chromatic aberration. I like to duplicate my illustration first and apply it to that new layer. We can really simply just go to the adjustments and find the chromatic aberration here. And you can see the kind of effect it gives it. It will come out from that black circle over there. So usually I'll position that black circle around the face so that the face stays clear. And for this first pass, I don't have it too obvious. I set it quite low just to give it that little bit of that multi-dimensional look. Because after that, we can go in with the pencil select tool on the chromatic aberration, and I will selectively add the effect. I avoid putting it on the hard lines, and instead I'll choose the areas within singular elements to make my shading look more three-dimensional. So I'm gonna add it to the middle of the hair. And onto the shading of the clothes. And I always like to add it to the eyes. Finally, because we duplicated this layer, I'm gonna go in with the erase tool and I'll erase the parts where I think the effect is a bit too obvious. And I'm pretty happy with this. Now, let's move on to the next trick. I think this works particularly well for close-up portraits like this. So what we will do is we'll go into Gaussian blur, use the pencil select, and with an airbrush, I'm gonna select the areas around her face. And I'll adjust the blur. This is really good for illustrations with a very strong emphasis and focus on our character, and this trick really draws our attention to her face. Next, we will get into adding texture. There are two ways of doing it. The first is manually adding texture, and the second is using the noise setting. Let's try manually adding the texture first. I will use a heavily textured brush, and Procreate has quite a few under the painting brushes and material brushes. They will all work fine. You can just experiment and choose your favorite. But for this, I'll use Glover in the materials brushes. Using a muted brown, I'm just gonna paint over the illustration lightly on a new layer. We don't want to cover our painting up, especially around the face area. We're just trying to subtly add texture. Then we will set this layer to overlay mode, and we can adjust the brightness or opacity. This really adds that traditional paint texture, and it's great for finishing works, especially those with a painterly art style. And for the second method of adding texture is adding noise. So we're gonna go to adjustments and click the noise setting. These little settings are really up to your own personal preference, but I like to keep the main slider quite low, and I'll usually change it to multi under this tab. We are really aiming for a really subtle texture that adds some extra dimension and grain without it being too noticeable, so I keep everything quite low. And those are some ways to finish up our paintings. For the mission, try out some of these finishing tricks on your character art. Like the particle effects, you don't have to use all of them that we cover in the lesson, especially the blur effect, which I think works best only for portraits. And that's chapter 7 finished. Congratulations on finishing chapter 1 to 7. In this lesson, we learned about some finishing tricks to apply to our finished works. In the next bonus chapters, I will share a little bit about my experience freelancing and give you some tips if you are looking to find some work for yourself. See you there!